What kind of monsters lock an 8-year-old girl in a shed over a few flowers? That's the question that burned through James Carter's mind as he watched, heart hammering, two strangers in crisp uniforms shove his granddaughter, Emma, into a rusty utility shed and slam the door shut. The quiet suburban morning shattered like glass, and James, a retired courthouse guard with a nose for trouble, wasn't about to let these impostors walk away. What he did next, forcing them to their knees in the mud until the cops showed up, would spark a firestorm of whispers and debates across the neighborhood, a story so raw it'd make your blood boil and your heart race. It was one of those postcard-perfect Saturdays, the kind where the sun spills golden light over neat lawns and white picket fences. The air carried the sweet scent of blooming jasmine, and birds chirped like they had nowhere else to be. In this cozy corner of suburbia, 8-year-old Emma knelt in the grass, her small hands digging into the cool soil. She was planting marigolds, her face lit with the kind of joy only a kid can muster, whispering little secrets to the earth as if it might whisper back. Her laughter danced through the air, pure and unbothered, while her makeshift gardenia tangle of flowers and sprouting seeds promised a summer of color. James sat on the porch, his old wooden chair creaking under him. Years in courthouse security had carved him into a man who saw the world clearly. Justice wasn't just a word, it was a necessity. His eyes, warm with love for Emma, still held the sharpness of someone who'd spent decades reading people, spotting lies in the twitch of a jaw or the flicker of a glance. He watched her, but he also watched the street, always aware of the world beyond their little haven. Then he saw them. Two men striding up the sidewalk, their steps too measured, their uniforms too perfect. Badges gleamed, insignias sat just right, but something was off. James's gut churned, a warning honed by years of facing folks who hid bad intentions behind polished exteriors. They called themselves HOA enforcers, their voices dripping with fake authority, the kind that sounds rehearsed. Neighborhood regulations, the taller one barked, pointing at Emma's garden like it was a crime scene. Unauthorized. Tear it out. James stood, his broad frame steady, unyielding. Morning, he said, polite but cool, his eyes locked on theirs, searching for the truth they weren't offering. Mind showing me some ID? And proof of this violation? His words were calm, but they carried weight, like a judge's gavel. The men stiffened, their confidence cracking just enough for James to see through. Eh? They exchanged a quick glance, a silent huddle of doubt. That's when James knew they were fakes, or at least way out of their depth. Emma, obviously us to detention, kept planting her marigolds, the sun glinting off her hair like a halo. But James's instincts screamed trouble. Emma, go inside, he said, his voice low, urgent. She looked up, confused, but before she could move, everything went to hell. The shorter man lunged, grabbing her arm with a roughness that froze James's blood. In a blur, they dragged her to the utility shed, a rickety thing of rust and wood, and shoved her inside, locking the door with a sickening click. The world stopped. James's heart pounded like a war drum, rage and fear colliding in his chest. Emma's muffled sobs leaked through the shed's walls, each one a knife to his soul. For a split second, he was paralyzed, the horror of it sinking in. Then fury took over, a wildfire roaring through him. These strangers, these liars, had dared to touch his granddaughter, to lock her in a shed like an animal, all for some petty power trip. It was unthinkable, unforgivable. James charged, his fists hammering the shed door with a force that shook the ground. Each blow was a demand, a vow, a grandfather's love-turned weapon. "Open this door!" he roared, his voice raw, shaking with a fury that could have split the sky. The wood groaned, splintering under his assault, but it held for now. Inside, Emma's cries grew louder, her fears slicing through his haze of anger, fueling him. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a storm, a reckoning, every punch a promise to get her out. The impostors stood frozen, their smugness gone, replaced by wide-eyed panic. They hadn't expected these a grandfather who fought back, who saw through their charade. James's voice thundered over Emma's sobs, a beacon pulling her towards safety. "You're done," he growled at them, his eyes burning with a clarity that made them shrink. He was more than Emma's protector. He was every person who'd ever been bullied by fake authority, every voice silenced by fear. And he wasn't backing down. The shed door finally gave way, wood cracking like a gunshot. Sunlight poured in, cutting through the dark, and there was Emma, curled up in the shadows, her small frame trembling. James rushed to her, pulling her into his arms, shielding her from the nightmare. Her sobs quieted against his chest, and for a moment the world was just them, grandfather and granddaughter, safe again. He carried her out, her warmth grounding him, her trust in him a lifeline. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up. Neighbors peeked from windows, then stepped onto porches, drawn by the commotion. The impostors, now cornered, sank to their knees in the mud, their uniforms stained, their lies exposed. James loomed over them, his voice ablade. "Kneel," he said, and they did, their bravado crumbling like wet paper. It wasn't just defeat, it was humiliation, a public unraveling of their scam. The sight of them, groveling in the dirt, was a bitter kind of justice, one James savored as he held Emma close. The crowd grew, neighbors clustering, their whispers buzzing with shock and outrage. They trusted the HOA, followed its rules, but these men were frauds, preying on their quiet lives. Mrs. Larson, who'd always kept her lawn perfect to avoid fines, shook her head, her voice trembling. "How dare they?" Mr. Patel, usually reserved, stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "This ends now." The air crackled with their anger, their unity, a community rising from fear to fight back. James stood tall, Emma still in his arms, his presence a rallying cry. He wasn't just a grandfather. He was a symbol of what happened when you stood up. His years in the courthouse had taught him one thing: justice didn't come from silence. It came from action, from truth, from people refusing to bow. And now, his neighbors saw it too. Sirens wailed, growing louder, and soon police cars screeched to a stop, lights flashing. The crowd erupted, cheers mixing with demands for answers. The officers moved in, calm but firm, cuffing the impostors with a satisfying snap. The men's faces were ashen, their lies laid bare as they were read their rights. It was over: their scam, their power, their hold on this neighborhood, all gone. As the police cars pulled away, the crowd didn't scatter. They stayed talking, planning, their voices alive with purpose. They'd been quiet too long, letting rules they didn't understand choke their lives. Now, they wanted change: meetings, new guidelines, a community built on trust, not fear. James watched, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. This wasn't just his win, it was theirs. Emma, back in her garden the next morning, was different, stronger. Her hands moved with purpose, planting seeds like she was staking a claim. Other kids joined her, their laughter a defiance of yesterday's fear. The garden wasn't just dirt and flowers anymore, it was a symbol, a promise of growth, of resilience. Neighbors gathered, too, swapping stories, shaking James's hand, their gratitude raw and real. "You gave us our courage back," one said, and James knew it was true. The neighborhood felt new, alive, like it had shed a heavy skin. Porch lights glowed warmer, conversations flowed freer. James stood on his porch, watching Emma and her friends, the hum of lawnmowers blending with their giggles. The fight wasn't over. There'd always be new threats, new lies, but he wasn't alone. This community, forged in the heat of that day, would stand together. And James, his purpose reignited, knew he'd be right there with them, ready to face whatever came next.